Before sunrise, the bakery door opens to a silent queue, and today each loaf costs nearly twice yesterday's silver. Inside, flour dust hangs like smoke while the baker cuts smaller portions, knowing wages have not risen with bread. Across the square, farm wives clutch baskets, laborers argue, and a single sack of wheat suddenly feels like winter itself. Yet the fields beyond town are still green, which makes the panic stranger. If wheat exists, why is bread vanishing? The answer begins not in the oven, but in barns, roads, river locks, and the men controlling release. For a household living on weekly wages, bread is not one purchase among many, it is nearly everything. When the loaf shrinks, meat disappears first, then lamp oil, then shoes, until hunger starts rearranging every domestic decision. Farmers suffer differently. They have grain somewhere in the chain, yet debts, rents, and delays keep cash painfully distant. Millers fear idle stones, vendors fear angry crowds, and magistrates fear what empty stomachs can turn a town into. And hidden within that fear is the first great reveal. Scarcity alone rarely explains a price shock this sharp. Somewhere between field and table, someone gains power whenever grain stops moving, and ordinary people start guessing. In every age, uncertainty has a market value, and those nearest information can turn confusion into margins. That morning, the poorest pay first because hunger cannot wait for carts, contracts, or tomorrow's rumored delivery. The richest wait behind shuttered doors, where sellers, servants, and stored flour soften the shock for a while. To understand why bread doubled, we must rewind. Past the riot to the ordinary machinery of a wheat town. Under a pale spring mist, wheat rises in long furrows outside the town, each field tied to rents and promises. The farmer's year begins before harvest, with seed bought on credit and tools repaired for one more season. Credit is everywhere here, though rarely visible. Seed from merchants, rent deferred, labor promised, repayment expected after threshing. Summer brings height and color. Then cutting crews move through the gold with sickles, sweat, and practiced rhythm. At first glance, this looks like simple abundance, but every sheaf already belongs partly to someone else. After threshing, grain pours like treasure from husk to sack, and families finally see a year's labor made visible. Yet wheat is not bread yet, nor money yet, and that gap between product and cash is dangerous. Some grain stays in the barn for household survival. The rest must travel through a chain of tolls. First comes the wagon road, where mud, axle brakes, and distance can quietly erase a farmer's margin. Then comes the mill, where stones, water, and waiting transform wheat. But milling itself adds cost and delay. Then the market hall, where buyers examine samples, weigh sacks, and decide what the town will eat this week. In calm years, this chain works almost invisibly, and people mistake smooth delivery for natural order. But markets are systems, not miracles, and systems break where power concentrates most quietly. In this town, that quiet power sits in storage. Whoever can hold grain controls time itself, and time matters because wheat sold today feeds families, while wheat withheld until winter feeds margins first. Granaries solve real problems, of course: moisture, rot, pests, and the need to bridge one harvest to the next. Storage is protection against chaos, which is precisely why control over storage becomes a form of market power. A farmer with one barn stores survival. A merchant with 10 warehouses stores optionality, leverage, and patience. That difference changes bargaining entirely, because desperate sellers must move quickly while patient buyers can simply wait. So even before any failed harvest, the wheat market is already unequal in information, timing, and cash flow. Still, inequality alone does not double bread prices. Something tighter, more immediate, must squeeze the chain. That squeeze begins with weather, not catastrophe, but a patchy season of damp fields and uncertain yields. The harvest comes in lighter than expected, enough to alarm merchants, though not enough to starve the town. And that is the dangerous middle ground, where uncertainty breeds speculation long before actual emptiness appears. Once traders suspect tighter supply ahead, every sack becomes both food and a wager on tomorrow. Farmers feel that wager immediately, because buyers lower offers at the gate, while claiming the season has turned dangerous. They cite damp grain, transport risk, and uncertain winter demand, all reasonable words that somehow reduce only the farmer's share. Many sell anyway, needing cash for rent, seed debts, and wages promised to neighbors who helped cut. So grain leaves the countryside cheaply, not because wheat is worthless, but because liquidity is scarce where crops are grown. This is the second reveal. Price weakness at the farm can coexist with price pain in town. Once inside warehouses, the logic changes completely, because owners are no longer selling labor time, but managing inventory against uncertainty. They can dry the grain, sort it, blend qualities, and most importantly, decide how much reaches market now. Releasing everything would calm prices quickly, but holding part back creates tighter visible supply and stronger bargaining conditions. Nobody must announce a conspiracy. Each merchant only needs to act cautiously, and caution itself becomes upward pressure. In uncertain markets, restraint looks prudent, respectable, even necessary, which is why pricing power often hides inside normal behavior. By the next market day, fewer sacks appear beneath the hall's beams, and buyers begin bidding against fear. Millers, worried about idle stones, offer more than before, not because demand surged, but because continuity suddenly matters. Bakers follow, competing for flour because a closed oven loses customers, labor, and tomorrow's precious cash flow. And there, in a single week, a modest harvest shortfall becomes a full-price spiral through competition. The town sees only dearer bread, but the mechanism is inventory management, amplified by anxious downstream buyers. Storage does not merely preserve grain under stress, it transforms physical supply into strategic timing. Timing matters because bread is bought daily, while grain can be withheld for weeks without public visibility. That invisibility creates volatility. Consumers react to shelves, not stocks, and shelves can be made to look bare. A few delayed wagons, a cautious release schedule, one rumor at the docks, and panic acquires evidence. Now the truth is clear, bread rose not simply from shortage, but from who controlled the pause. Yet storage alone is not enough. Transport decides whether local tightness remains temporary or hardens into a wider crisis. Normally, nearby districts could soften the blow, sending grain from better fields toward weaker ones through carts and barges. But autumn rains have damaged roads and slowed river traffic, turning distance into another hidden tax on food. Every delay raises costs. Horses tire, sacks spoil, crews demand wages, and lenders charge for time. So replacement grain exists, just not cheaply, and certainly not fast enough to calm the first panic. This is how logistics enters the story. Transport friction converts regional abundance into local scarcity and sharper prices. Warehouse owners understand this perfectly, which gives their stored grain even more market power as roads worsen. Millers understand it too and begin securing flour earlier, buying defensively before their rivals can. Defensive buying feels rational for each participant, but collectively it drags future demand into the present. And when tomorrow's demand arrives early, today's market looks emptier than the harvest alone would justify. Merchants now release grain in measured trickles, maximizing optionality while watching weather, roads, and each other's behavior. Nobody wants to be first selling cheaply if winter worsens, so hesitation spreads like cold through the chain. The result is a market that behaves as if famine were coming, even before famine exists. Prices, then, are not just measurements of supply, they are forecasts, fears, and bargaining positions made visible. And once people believe prices will rise again next week, they buy faster, confirming the merchant's caution. Fear becomes demand, demand becomes thinner shelves, and thinner shelves become proof that fear was justified. This feedback loop is older than modern exchanges, yet already it has all the anatomy of speculation. Not paper contracts and shouting pits, but physical sacks treated like tomorrow's more valuable money. By now, bread's price contains weather, storage, transport, and expectations, all compressed into one smaller loaf. And because wages have barely moved, the mechanism is about to escape markets and enter ordinary lives. By evening, families recalculate supper around absence: less broth, fewer onions, no meat, and bread sliced painfully thinner. Hunger first changes quantity, then dignity. as people who once bought openly begin waiting for leftovers behind stalls. Day laborers suffer fastest because their pay arrives in fixed coins while food now behaves like a moving target. A mason, a carter, a washerwoman, each still works the same hours, yet each can purchase less tomorrow. This is inflation in its most intimate form, when effort stays constant but survival becomes progressively harder to afford. Bakers try stretching flour with cheaper grains, but customers notice the darker crust and thinner, heavier crumb. Some accuse the bakers of greed, not realizing their ovens now burn through margins as flour prices keep climbing. Millers run longer hours yet profit little because expensive grain and nervous buyers compress every decision into risk. The third reveal arrives here. Not everyone inside a high-price system is actually winning. Real gains concentrate upstream, where storage owners can choose timing while everyone downstream must keep goods moving. Meanwhile, farmers who sold early watchtown prices soar and feel cheated by the very market they fed. They had grain, but not patience, because rent collectors, seed merchants, and unpaid helpers demanded settlement immediately. Cash flow, not harvest size, determined their weakness, which is why distress selling kept countryside prices deceptively low. Some farmers now hide a few sacks, hoping to sell later, but small barns offer little security or scale. Pests, damp, theft, and family need all threaten that plan, proving storage power favors those built for waiting. So, the countryside becomes bitter. Producers see high prices, yet lack the infrastructure to benefit from them. In town, rumors do what wagons cannot, traveling faster than grain and sharpening every purchase into precaution. One story says river barges have stalled. Another claims merchants are hiding sacks. Another predicts a brutal winter. None must be fully true to matter in volatile markets. Believable fear can move prices by itself. Households begin buying earlier in the day, then buying more than usual, if only to avoid tomorrow's shock. That behavior drains stalls faster, making scarcity visible sooner and rewarding those who anticipated panic first. Now even modest merchants start hoarding flour, because selling steadily feels foolish when replacement costs rise daily. The chain is no longer merely tight, it is defensive, and defensive systems often become self-worsening. Credit begins tightening too, as lenders fear defaults and demand harder terms from millers, bakers, and tenants. Dearer credit means fewer buffers, which means each participant must pass costs onward more quickly than before. So bread now carries financing costs as well, invisible yet real, folded into every hot loaf. Apprentices are dismissed, ovens burn fewer batches, and carts make shorter runs to conserve labor and fuel. What began as a grain problem is spreading into employment, movement, and the entire town's daily tempo. Some families leave for larger towns or river ports, hoping wages there might outrun the price of bread. Others stay and borrow, trading future harvests for present meals, deepening dependence on the same gatekeepers. Yet pressure creates innovation, and somewhere beyond the market square, people begin imagining a different route for grain. A miller proposes direct purchases from nearby farmers, bypassing the largest warehouses and shortening the chain. The idea is simple: fewer hands between field and flour should mean faster delivery and lower markups. But simple ideas still need carts, trust, dry storage, and enough credit to pay farmers immediately. Immediate payment matters most, because farmers cannot wait for flour sales any more than before. So the miller borrows against his stones and building, risking everything to secure direct wheat deliveries. Nearby farmers agree cautiously, sending small loads at dawn along lesser roads to avoid notice. For the first time in weeks, flour reaches the bakery without first passing through dominant warehouse hands. The loaves are still expensive but slightly larger, and customers notice relief before they understand the mechanism. That small success reveals another truth. Market power weakens when alternative channels become real, not merely imagined. The warehouse owners respond quietly, lowering offers to farmers nearby and pressuring carters to favor established routes again. Control rarely defends itself with speeches. It defends itself through access, timing, storage, and selective generosity. A favored baker suddenly receives flour sooner, while independent ovens wait longer and face another jump in costs. Farmers, too, are tested, because direct trade offers better prices, but fewer guarantees if roads fail. The old chain was extractive, yet stable. The new channel is fairer, yet fragile and undercapitalized. So the town enters a tense experiment, balancing efficiency against resilience and fairness against concentrated market power. More millers join carefully, pooling carts, sharing small stores, and coordinating deliveries before the largest merchants can react. Shared storage changes everything, because scale no longer belongs only to the warehouse men by the river. With a little more capacity, grain can wait a few days, and waiting is bargaining power made physical. This is the countermove's core lesson. Small producers gain leverage when they can store, finance, and coordinate time. Winter finally arrives, and with it a clearer picture of real supply, not merely autumn's amplified fear. The town does not starve, because grain existed all along. The true crisis was access during uncertainty. Prices remain high, but they stop leaping, which for exhausted households feels almost like mercy. Bakers bake predictable batches again. Millstones turn on schedule, and market queues shorten by a few faces. Farmers who join direct trade keep a slightly larger share, though not enough to erase all debts. Warehouse owners still matter, but their dominance is moderated now by competition, visibility, and new habits. The system has adapted, not transformed. Fewer extremes, more routes, yet the same fundamental dependence on bread. And that is resolution in real economies, where equilibrium returns unevenly and nobody emerges entirely untouched. Some households recover slowly, rebuilding cupboards one loaf at a time as wages catch up only partially. Others carry scars longer in pawned tools, postponed marriages, and children sent early into work. A season of volatile bread has redrawn social lines more subtly than any battle ever could. Because prices are never just numbers, they are permissions, limits, and choices distributed across an entire community. The loaf on a table records weather, roads, credit, storage, rumor, and the balance of power. It also records who could wait, who could borrow, and who had to sell too soon. That is why bread doubled here, not from empty fields alone, but from choke points governing movement through fear. Modern markets still work this way, though with steel silos, freight networks, and invisible screens replacing barns and halls. Commodities rise when supply chains tighten, but the sharpest pain often comes from storage, logistics, and financing pressure. Pricing power belongs to whoever can hold inventory, secure credit, and wait while others cannot. So every expensive staple asks the same old question: is the shortage real or controlled by choke points? In the end, markets move through human constraints, and every loaf still carries the architecture of power.